Hello, everybody. This is Dexter Kendrick, and I'd like to welcome you back to the next installment of Heavenly Body TV, your place for relevant astrological advice and psychic phenomena. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Dexter Kendrick Soul channel for more forecasts and updates. All right, today we're going to be talking about Pluto, god of the underworld. Some cultures, he's considered to be the god of death. Many of us are familiar with his conversation, but do we really know what he stands for in the birth chart? Well, essentially, Pluto represents the aspects of ourselves that have come to the end of their cycle, and it's time for them to die. It's time for certain aspects of ourselves to leave so that we can give birth to a new sense of self, raise our consciousness to a higher level, etc. How many of us have ever come to been in a struggle with some circumstance or situation, and then after a period of time of struggling and holding on, realizing that it was actually over? And if it be a relationship, a love relationship, for example, a romantic relationship, what are some of the emotions that come up and arise up from within us when we realize we've come to the end of a previously held on to idea, something that actually was working at a period of time? Certainly we wish we could turn back the hand of time and go backward, but much as is the mythology surrounding Pluto, or Hades, depending on the conversation you're using, much of the conversation around that is that we cannot undo the path that we've already followed, especially when we come to the end of that cycle. And so that is what Pluto represents. Pluto is currently transiting through the sign of Capricorn, and so it's going to be he's going to be expressing himself in a Capricornian way. We're going to be talking about that during this short episode. We're also going to be talking about how it is making major aspects to certain signs and what that means for those signs. Certainly, if you have other questions, if I'm not able to cover every sign in this conversation, but certainly reach out to me at Dexter Kendrick Soul on Instagram, and also Dexter Kendrick Soul on Facebook. I'm happy to answer any brief questions that you may have. I'm also available via private practice. So nonetheless, moving forward, if Pluto represents those aspects of ourselves that are trying to die, that are trying to leave our lives and release, what happens when we experience our response to the end of a cycle? Some of us will experience rage. Some of us will experience feelings of abandonment. Some of us will experience feelings of anger and vulnerability. And all of those are energies that we don't come into contact with very often, because Pluto is essentially, he represents the raw aspects of our emotions that are beneath the surface. Let's go into mythology mode for a second so we can understand a little bit more about what Pluto represents psychologically for us. So historically, Pluto was one of the sons of Saturn, which I discussed in the previous conversation on Saturn's current transit through Sagittarius. And once they went to war, after Zeus freed his brothers and sisters from Saturn, his father's belly, they went to war, and then of course Zeus became king of the gods. And they drew lots, his brothers Neptune and Pluto, Zeus's brothers Neptune and Pluto, drew lots to see what domain they would rule over. And so Neptune got the sea and the oceanic depths, and Pluto got hell, or the underworld, where he spent most of his time by himself. But he was in charge of the endings. He was in charge of the emotional material that is left over when we are stripped to our core. When we die, when we release some circumstance or person from our life, there's an emptiness, there's a void. And where do those emotions that come along with that process, where do they go? They can be raw at the end of a divorce, which some people might call bitter at times. They can be very, very uncomfortable and ugly, which can come when a loved one is ripped and yanked from our lives unexpectedly, when death comes to call, which it will visit all of us at some point in some area of our lives. It may be mostly other people is what Pluto represents. Pluto represents how we let go of things that are out of our control. And so the power lies transformatively in when we recognize that everything has a cycle, and when it comes to its end, there will be an end, and that we will have feelings about that end. And what do we do with our feelings? That's what Pluto really represents. Think about the god of the underworld. If you think about the center or the core of the earth, it's this bubbling cauldron of emotion. And if you look at our volcanoes, many times they look very calm on the surface. But there's always volcanic activity happening beneath the surface. It may not always be coming up to the surface, but it certainly is always active. And then once it becomes time to erupt, usually in our lives it erupts when something triggers it, when we are faced with feelings of humiliation or rejection or abandonment or victimization, or when we are experiencing feelings of terror and fear. Here are times when our emotional material comes up, and it can be quite scary. If you think about some of the scary movies that are out there about, what souls allegedly look like in the afterlife, it's actually fiction. But nonetheless, some of our emotional material, that's emotional material you're seeing when we're talking about ghosts, etc., energies that are not satisfied. It's because they have not released. They have not let go of the struggle. And so what Pluto does is it triggers aspects of ourselves. Think about it. We have all had some traumatic experience at some point in time in our lives that we have dealt with and made no sense to us. All of us have had some experience. Some people have had it in their relationship with their parents. Some people have had it when they've been torn away from siblings. Some people have had it when they have lost everything they worked so hard to build in this life, like their life savings or even their homes. Some people experience this loss of control when a loved one dies, even. And so we're all visited by these aspects of Pluto that are not always awakened in us. But what happens is when we come into contact with our own rage and our own fury, it can feel overwhelming. Although our emotions cannot hurt us, it can feel quite overwhelming. But in order to move forward, we have to do something with that energy. And what do? We send it to the underworld. It's still in us, but we begin to operate differently. We begin to see through new eyes as we're healing. Some wounds don't ever fully heal, but they've opened up our eyes. If we believed our loved ones would always be with us and we never wanted to think about death or the end of that relationship, even those we're very close to, when it visits us, it can bring up some pretty powerful stuff. Some stuff that's scary even to us, but we have to, in order to survive, for our soul to live, we can't allow that anger and rage to fuel us. We have to transform it. We have to find joy. We have to create more joy. We have to create peace, etc. And so Pluto rules the area of your chart. Please look at where Capricorn lies in your chart on alabe.com. It's currently in Capricorn, and it has been there since 2008. I oblige you to take a look at the changes that have occurred in your life since 2008. What area of your life have you been faced with considerable loss of control? Sometimes even falling in love feels that way. Loss of control, because it brings up insecurities, brings up jealousies. Pluto is activated anytime we experience any kind of sense of loss of control. Whenever we are feeling out of sorts or out of control with our emotional material, that's in essence, Pluto is coming up from our underworld and bringing all that information from our last traumatic experience that is unhealed so that we can see it, work on it, and shift it. Otherwise, we're falling into habit patterns. Not everybody will master Pluto strategically, but hopefully with this conversation, you'll begin to get a sense of how you can begin to start on that pathway. Pluto and Capricorn. Let's take a look at Capricorn. Capricorn is the 10th sign of the zodiac. It represents our esteem, the esteem other people hold us in, how people see us who don't know us that well, how our standing is in the public, in the community, what our vocation and our calling is. And so Pluto expressing himself through Capricorn is definitely going to be expressing himself in a way that tears away our loss of control over how people see us. Life will be sending us circumstances and people that will knock us off of any kind of facade we have been wearing to the public eye and say, no, you have to expose yourself. This is not real. Pluto will work to tear down anything that is not real, because at the end of the day, remember, Pluto is the god of death. At the end of the day, Pluto is only attacking those parts of yourself that is actually trying to die. There are parts of you that are trying to die so that you can be reborn to a more full and whole self. Of course, we're always whole on the inside, but sometimes we take on armor and we begin to wear hats and masks, and we begin to identify with those masks and hats as though those are really us, and they are not really us. They are hats that we might wear in the public eye, and sometimes it's appropriate to change those hats because they're no longer appropriate for the walk that we're on, especially when life pulls the carpet out from underneath of us and says, no, 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 no. At some point in time, you've gotten off the beaten path. that last traumatic event, that last abusive relationship started you looking for other abusive relationships, and you haven't recognized that you're in a cycle. That last addiction started you on, when you got off of crack, you got onto to cocaine. It was a lighter drug, but you're still in the same addictive pattern because you're looking to fill up that space with something, and then you whittled your way down to cigarettes, but it's still a process of healing. And so at certain times, you'll notice even addictive behaviors begin to resurface. Let's take a look. Mythologically, Pluto had to steal everything that he got. In the underworld, there's no light. There's no light. There's very little love. There's very little pleasantry because everything is just real. Everything's raw and real in hell. And you can read almost any mythology from Islam all the way up to Christianity and even Greco-Roman mythology. The conversation is very real. Everybody is just who they are down to the bare bones, if you will. And so even his bride, because he craved love, even his bride he had to steal. He wore a helmet of invisibility. And of course the planet in the sky, we were unable to see it for decades, years and years and years. And it's the last planet in our solar system, very, very small, but it's there. It appears every so often you can catch it, but you cannot see it with the naked eye. And nonetheless, when he was ready to take on a bride, he took a female who was inadvertently taking fruit from the land. And so Persephone picked up a pomegranate and ate the seeds. Little did she know it was a trap. And so he kidnapped her, abducted her, and he took her innocence. He made her his wife. Excuse me. He made her his wife, he took her virginity, and she became queen of the underworld. And she was only able to revisit up here, the earth, for 6 months out of the year, equivalent to the 6 seeds that she ate as a part of the fruit. So wherever Pluto is in our charts, we will find that we will feel abducted and taken out of our normal environment and taken into some pretty strange territory that will awaken some feelings within us: vulnerability, fear, rage, anger, you name it. Feelings that we didn't even know existed begin to come up from the underworld and claim us during that period of time. You can think about the last time you were betrayed by a loved one, etc. You perhaps felt pretty raw about it. And how were you to the people you interacted with daily? It was probably a little hard to get it up for them, to give them that, smiling 10%, 100% joy, because you didn't have it to give. All you had was where you were at in that moment, and that's what Pluto is interested in. Who are you? And what are you going to be sharing with the world at large? Because everybody is going through something. So your healing crisis is a part of my healing crisis, is a part of their healing crisis. And so it helps to level the playing field, etc. Let's talk about where it's going to show up with certain signs. I'll make this as brief as possible. So with the earth signs, of course, Capricorn, we kind of already touched on Capricorn. Pluto is in your first house. Since 2008, you have been changing your identity. You have been shifting how you see yourself, how you want others to relate to you, and how you're relating with the outside world. There have been circumstances that have come in that have perhaps pulled the rug out from underneath of you. You've seen some truths about yourself, some places where you may have been lying to yourself to keep up a public facade, and it's no longer going to work. Those things are going to continue to disintegrate and decay because Pluto, the god of death, is only trying to kill off what you don't need any longer. Even though it might be familiar, anything that's toxic and familiar has to go. And so there's going to be an overhaul. People will probably come into your life from now until 2023, when Pluto leaves Capricorn and goes into Aquarius. People will come into your life and show you aspects of yourself that are changing for the better. For the better. You're going to be making some serious decisions about your life and your lifestyle and how that is going to work for you. And people will either be able to take it or leave it. The god of death, Pluto, the god of the underworld, was not concerned with what was left over in the upper world. His domain was taking with him what actually mattered. And that's why we can see how coal that lies beneath the earth, under significant pressure and crisis, will transform into a diamond. He's only concerned with that which will make us more strong, more valuable, and so that we can have greater integrity with ourselves, be able to get to sleep at night at least, right? Taurus, for you, because Capricorn is a trine aspect, one of the most harmonious aspects in the zodiac, the most harmonious. Taurus, Pluto is going to be in the ninth house, which is your philosophy around life. So Pluto is going to be pulling the rug out from under you and tearing away the veil with regard to how you see life. Perhaps you thought that certain loved ones, that you would outlive certain loved ones. You would not have to experience certain emotions like grief or loss. But Pluto is going to be showing up and showing you a different realm of that so that you can learn to live each day as though it were your last, and so that you can appreciate and value every aspect of your life and what you can do while you're here, because it's going to awaken you to the fact that time is limited. Saturn, which is the natural ruler of Capricorn, while Pluto is traveling through Capricorn, time is going to be a big conversation. How am I spending my time here with the knowledge in the back of my head that death is always on my heels? And I will not. I was born in the middle of the story, and I'm going to die in the middle of the story. What do I want the story for the timeline that I'm here to say about me? And that's the conversation. Taurus is going to be creating a philosophy for living so that every moment is valuable. Virgo, the fifth house, the conversation of sharing from the heart space. The natural ruler of the fifth house is Leo. Pluto in Capricorn is going to be saying, where has my armor? Because Capricorn rules our standing in the community, and it also represents the armor that we wear to protect us from attacks from the outside world. It's the fortitude that we have within ourselves. But where has that fortitude and that armor become so strong that no one can penetrate it? No one can get in? Where has your solitude, which is healthy, become isolation? Because at certain points, feelings of vulnerability, and we do have to open up our heart space in the fifth house. It's the house of gambles and risks. It's the house that Leo rules. It's a fiery house. Even though Capricorn is there and earthy, certainly, Virgo, you're going to always be practical in this way because Capricorn is going to express itself practically. But where is that practicality always finding a flaw? And where has that become a tragic flaw with regard to you opening yourself up to relate to somebody? Even if you're married and in a relationship, where are there truths that you're not speaking to your partner because it perhaps could kill off? Of course, Pluto's always interested in killing. Pluto's always interested in killing off what is dead already, what we have not acknowledged to be dead, but what is dead. Pluto rules over every kind of transformation, cocoons, from caterpillars to cocoon to butterfly. That is Pluto. That is Pluto. It can be a crisis. It can be a painful circumstance. Caterpillars fast. They don't eat for that period of time that they are in that chrysalis and transforming and metamorphosing. They are in solitude and isolation. But they come out and they are themselves. Take it or leave it. They're not who they were. They are better than they were. And they are more mature because of the crisis that they overcame. So Virgo, until 2023, from 2008 on, you can probably look back at 08 and 09 and see what kind of shifts have been happening in your love life. Even moving forward, what kind of shifts has life been bringing you? What have people and circumstances been bringing you to show you that your armor may be a little too tight? What has to go? What has to go in order for you to open up and live and love? The water signs, Cancer, the seventh house, Cancer, vulnerability. Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn is going to be bringing you into contact with vulnerability. Perhaps your partner doesn't relate emotionally like you do, and that is frightening. Perhaps that's pretty frightening and enraging even if you're starting to feel open and begin to want to close off. But how is that closing you off from making greater commitments, not only to another person, but to yourself? How is that closing you off from finding out and seizing the moment so that you can take in what it is that you need? Certain things will have to die off regarding the types of partners that you're drawing to you. Certainly you'll be drawing, every light draws flies, will attract flies. So certainly you'll be drawn to you some unhealthy individuals, but that's an opportunity for you to see the path you perhaps used to be on and begin to shift it, to say, no, I'm changing this habit pattern. Pluto, you don't fool me. I'm changing this habit pattern. I have to be honest with myself about what I thought I deserved and shift my value structure with regard to my partnerships. Pisces in the 11th house, you're going to be shifting with regard to your friendships. Your friendships are going to be showing up. They're going to be expecting, relying on you for certain things, to behave in certain ways that perhaps at one time was appropriate for you, but since 08, 09 is no longer becoming appropriate. It's no longer appropriate, and more so it's going to be more and more out of alignment with where you're headed. So your friendships are going to be taking some significant turns with regard to transformation and letting go of what's no longer valid. Scorpio, your relationship with your loved ones, your siblings, your cousins, your immediate relatives, and also the people you talk with on a daily basis, that's going to be undergoing a significant change. Any feelings of betrayal or loss or any grudges that you've been holding on to from beneath the surface, circumstances are going to trigger those aspects. Then you can either stay asleep to how you automatically behave when something triggers an emotional response within you, or you can begin to try and trace it back to its origin, find out how it's always you responding to the outside world, and no one is actually doing anything to you that you are not allowing them to do. You can take that power back from yourself. Of course, Pluto always includes some level of power struggle and psychology. And so we have to take a look at where we perhaps are attempting to manipulate other people in order to get our control. But the reason we're trying to get that control when that does show up is because we feel a loss of control in our lives. And so being able to kind of move pieces around and manipulate other people can help us at times feel a little better. But once we're able to step back into our solitude, Capricorn is associated with the mountain goat. They climb mountains by themselves. They go up by themselves. They come down by themselves. They may have a family, but they do their work alone. And so this work is inner work. I assert that the people and circumstances that come into your life at this time are to wake you up to your inner work. And when you notice that something has come to the end of its cycle, no one will be able to hold your hand. That is the essence of Pluto. There's some pretty scary experiences that can come when our emotions come home to visit, or when the god of the underworld comes up and pays us a visit. Lastly, the cardinal signs, Aries, Libra. Aries, the 10th house, your career. You're going to be feeling drawn toward pursuing something. You may not be sure of what it is, but regarding your profession and vocation, life is going to be showing you what is no longer showing up as valid. You may have decided you were going to study something at one point in time, or practice or behave at one point in time in certain ways, but now it's showing up to be invalid. Perhaps it's no longer feeding you. Perhaps your professional career is no longer feeding you, and you're going to have to do a second act. Pluto represents the second act. Of course, he comes up, he claims the lives of individuals who have come to the end of their current manifestation, and he gives them rebirth. Of course, they go to the underworld. They cannot undo their past. They cannot undo their past, but they can move forward. The afterlife is a life because there is work to do. After we die in one way, we certainly are obliged to have a greater life. Libra, the 4th house. The 4th house for you is an opportunity to take a look at family. So what does family mean for you? What does safety, security, and stability mean for you? Sometimes Pluto can bring the loss of a loved one, even a loss of a family member, as a means by which to wake us up to the fact that time is really of the essence, and what is most valuable to us with regard to our structure and stability in life, and who will care for us even when we're down and out. Who cares for you outside of your public standing? Of course, Capricorn once again rules how we are seen in the community at large. Who really cares for you when times are hard? Who can you call on? And that's what you're going to be doing, strengthening your relationships. Of course, Libra is the sign of partnerships and marriage. You're going to be strengthening your relationships by seeing who matters to you. Even if they're not blood relation, who is your family? Who can you count on? Who can you call upon? So once again, with Pluto traveling through Capricorn from now until 2023, we all have to take a look at the inner transformations that are occurring within us. Pluto and death of certain aspects of ourselves will not always be chasing us, but today Pluto did go direct in Capricorn. It has been retrograde from May until today, and so I assert that we have been reviewing certain aspects of ourselves that we put into place since the last time it went backward. And of course, we know that a retrograde means when a planet is appearing to move backward, we can recollect over the qualities of that. For Pluto, we can recollect all the changes we've gone through since 2008, when Pluto began to ask us to take a look at how we see ourselves, what our self-esteem is like, and how we're presenting ourselves to the community at large, what matters to us most, what our values are, and what our calling is, what we're bringing to the world. I oblige everybody to go back to alabe.com, take a look and see where Capricorn lies in the houses of your horoscope, and check me out on Facebook, Dexter Kendrick Soul, Instagram, Dexter Kendrick Soul. Please like, share, and subscribe this video. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. Pluto is not our enemy, he's actually our friend, and helping us to come into greater alignment with who we truly are underneath all of this armor and facade. May you be blessed. I will speak with you soon. Oh, by the way, coming up, there's a lunar eclipse in Aries coming up. It's going to be an interesting movement for all of us over the next 3 to 6 months, so don't miss it. Talk to you soon.